I'm carving some pumpkins for Halloween, and I thought it would be fun to do scary pumpkins for musicians. And I'm just using a craft pumpkin that you can get at any craft store. And the first step is to place on the pumpkin, but also make sure that it lies flat. So you need to fold some of the paper over because the pumpkin isn't a flat surface. And I'll get into more of why I chose this symbol once I start carving it. So just folding over the paper to make sure that it lies flat, or as flat as possible on the pumpkin. Trying to find the best place to fold the paper so that it'll lay as flat as possible for the next step. And the next step is just scoring the paper and the pumpkin beneath lightly with a craft knife. And this will be guidelines later for when you're actually carving the pumpkin. So you don't have to go very deep. It just needs to be just hard enough so that it's visible on the surface of the pumpkin after you're done scoring it. And just be careful because craft knives are very sharp. That's one of the good things about them, but also very bad sometimes. So we're just gonna outline the rest of the design here, and then we can go on to the next step, which is actually carving the pumpkin. So first we have to take off the top, and I'm just gonna score a line with the screwdriver, just as a guideline for me of where I want that cut to be. And then using another craft knife, just going around and cutting the top off so that we can get access to the inside. So the symbol that I'm using today is a clef. It's a music clef. And it's one that you don't see very often unless you're a viola player or a vocalist. Because oftentimes it's most well known as the alto clef, and that's when the middle line of the staff goes through the very middle of this clef. It can also be a soprano, mezzo-soprano, tenor, and baritone, depending on which line of the staff goes through the middle of the clef. And I thought it would be funny to use this because it's not as well known as, say, the treble clef or the bass clef. That most people learn right away whenever they're studying music. It's a little less well known, and if you're not familiar with it and you see it on a piece of music, it can be kind of scary because if you're not familiar with it, that can kind of throw a mental wrench at you when someone says, hey, here's this piece of music, I need you to learn it for a test or a performance, and it's written in this strange clef that you're not very familiar with. So yeah, I thought that part would be funny, is to make a pumpkin that would be a little frightening for musicians. So here I'm just finishing up the rest of the carving, being careful not to put my fingers behind the blade, making sure that I'm not cutting all the way through to the design and only cutting along the score marks that I had. And the next step is to put some, I'm just using crumpled up tissue paper to put behind the design to diffuse the light a little bit. So we're just going to lay it over the design and then cut a piece out with scissors that'll cover up the design. And we're going to put this on the inside so it needs to stick, and we're just going to use some craft glue and a brush that you don't care to get too dirty. This will wash off very easily, but make sure you're not using a really nice brush when you're doing this. And just going in through the top, putting glue around the inside of the design so that we can stick the tissue paper to that. And if you can't get to all the sides of the design, you can go through the front of the design and then fold up the tissue paper and put it in, and then gently press it against the glue that we put on the inside. And then we need to drill a hole, and this is going to be for the light fixture. So these pumpkins are very flammable, so you can't use a candle with them, so we have to use electric light source. Most times you can use a battery one, but those aren't very bright, so we're going to use this small watt LED bulb and this little candelabra base that has this spring clip that'll hold it in place. And here is the finished pumpkin. And here's the light on the back. It's got the little switch. Turn off and on. And if you're watching this in the future, be sure to check out part 2 of the pumpkin series.